Good evening, Praise Chapel Fresno, and all those of you tuning in, wherever you're tuning in at, whatever you're tuning in on, we're just appreciative that you're here with us this evening. Remember, you can continue to support with your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts. You can do that via EasyTithe on your smartphone app, or you can go to easytithe.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno. You'll see which one you can give on, or you can also go to praisechapelfresno.com. Click the menu in the upper right-hand corner, go down to where you see Give. It's going to take you to a third-party website we're contracted with that you can give safely and securely. Or if you're joining us on our in-person services, we have envelopes behind every chair. Tithes and offerings box is located just outside the sanctuary for availability for you to give in. If you'd like to do it that way, or if you're still at home, you can mail in, drop off your tithes or offerings or love gifts via our campus address. If you don't know what that is, go to Google and search Praise Chapel Fresno, California. You'll see our address, and you can mail it in. We'll get it deposited in a timely manner. So we're still continuing through... give me a second. I already had this set and it's messing up already. We're going through the book of Revelation, still going through that, but a few things that are coming up. We have our baseball game that we're going to be going to, the Fresno Grizzly Christian Night. That'll be happening this Saturday. We'll make sure that we alert you guys via our social media page where to meet up at so we can grab tickets, those kinds of things. But it'll be starting at 5 o'clock. There's a concert. The game will commence at 6 o'clock. Just going to be a great time being together, eating. And I mean, love is food. Food is love. And just being around a bunch of people that we do love. Going to be a lot of eating going on, but just going to have a fun time. And then our service, of course, on Sunday morning, 10 a.m., just continuing along. But just stay close to our Instagram, our Facebook. We're going to be doing some very exciting things here. We're going to be going through some updates, doing a few things, doing some deconstruction, some reconstruction, things like that here in the building. So stay attuned to what we're going to be doing. There is going to be some needed help. We're going to put out a work week schedule that will be for the second week of June. So you can kind of start looking ahead and seeing what we're doing. We're about a month out, that we're going to put together. So each day, those that want to take part will know exactly what we're doing, the times that we're doing it at, so you can take part, be here to be part of this if you want to. But of course, there's no urging there. But for those that have been saying, Pastor, we want to help, we want to do something, this is going to be the time to do something. Not only is it going to be just a better, or kind of just an updated things that we're doing, it's going to be one of the largest undertakings that Praise Chapel Fresno has gone under. So just a huge thing that we're going to be doing, going to need lots of help, lots of support. People are like, well, I'm injured, but I can be there and just be moral support or go to Dutch Bros or Starbucks, whatever we need to. That's always appreciated as well. There's lots of tiny things that need to be done. And if you have 5 people doing 100 things that can really be done by a few other people that don't require a whole lot, just it's going to be helpful. Whatever you can do is going to be helpful. But we're planning to just get it done in a week so that from Sunday to Sunday, bam, it's been changed. Everything's up and going. Doing a lot of research up ahead to make sure that we don't have any kind of stalls or any issues with wiring and programming. So I've been going through that on the back end, and we'll continue to go through that. But just stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot to do within that week. I'm taking some time off from my job just to make sure that we get everything done in a timely manner. But that's just the commitment that I promised to myself and to this church and to God, that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that these things get done. So whether I get paid for it or not, I'm still going to be here just to make sure that everything we're planning to do is being done. But that will be the second week in June. If you want to start looking at your calendars now, I'm not expecting people taking time off work or anything. I'm just doing that myself to make sure that things are done. We're still in the book of Revelations. I appreciate a lot of people have been saying, like, dang, Pastor Will, that's a hard book to undertake. I'm getting comments even from people outside of our church, other pastors, that kind of tune in from time to time. They're just like, that's a massive undertaking. And, to go through it scripture by scripture to get this done, it is a lot, and there's a lot of different opinions. And again, I'm not trying to give you Pastor Will's impression. I'm not trying to give you I'm going back through that apocalyptic style of interpretation, and I'm following that as closely as I can with each scripture that we're going to go through. So remember, I'm in the ESV version. So we're just about to wrap up the 11th chapter. We've talked about the 2 witnesses that come down. They have a very effective ministry in the Holy Spirit, and then Satan is allowed to overcome them. Their bodies are left in the street for 3.5 days. All the world is seeing it, and then God resurrects them and calls them up. So that's where we left off last Wednesday. So we're starting off today in verses 15 and 16 of chapter 11. Again, I'm in ESV, and it says this: Then the 7th angel blew his trumpet, And there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever." Verse 16. And the 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God. So it's a little different here. When the seventh seal was broken, there was a silence that happened. John writes about, everything fell silent when the seventh seal was broken. Well, when the seventh trumpet is blown, all of heaven begins to rejoice and declare that the earth is the dominion of the Lord. So, although Jesus does not return to the earth at this time to establish his kingdom on earth at this time, both events are anticipated. And that's what they're singing to, because right now we still have, the horde is out there. They've been released from the pit. They're going down. There's all sorts of death and warfare going on. But both events are anticipated, and they'll take place at the end of the tribulation when Jesus comes to earth in glory and defeats his enemies. So they're just declaring with the seventh trumpet that this will come to an end, and that Jesus Christ will come back and he'll reign dominion over the earth. And he'll defeat his enemies. He'll cast the beast and the false prophet into the lake of fire. Verse 19, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of the covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, pearls of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. Again, just so many things are happening on the earth that every single time a trumpet blows or something, the earth begins to shake. Now the ark, in the Old Testament, the ark symbolized God's presence. It contained the tablets of law. It wasn't just the Ten Commandments that were put in there. It was all the tablets of the law were put in there. There's an urn of manna. That's the angelic food that was fed to the Hebrews or the Jews while they were in their isolation. Aaron's rod that had budded, it had grown something from it. The ark disappeared actually through their exile, but it never lost its significance. So although it wasn't there, the Jewish culture always held to the Ark of the Covenant. Even though it disappeared and they didn't know where it was, everything always drew back to the Ark of the Covenant. The appearance of the ark in heaven indicates that God's presence and protection continue for his people. That's for the Jewish culture. Wars and earthly calamities cannot destroy the significance of the ark. Similarly, no power on earth can rob the believers of the presence and the protection of God. So whether or not people are actually seeing God physically move on the earth for them, even though people are not repenting, it doesn't mean that God's presence is not going to be amongst these people and offering them a protection, right? A third of the population is about to be wiped out. So that means the rest of the people that are there they're subject to it. But God's saying that for those that he set aside, his 144,000, his hands of protection are upon them, even though they don't see it. The great and awesome phenomenon at the opening of the temple and the revelation of the ark shows that the presence of the Lord is still there. It's reminiscent of God, of his manifestation at Mount Sinai when they're giving the temple, or when they're giving the Ten Commandments, when they're giving the laws. Moses comes down. It's very reminiscent of that. Now we're into chapter 12, verse 1. And it says, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars." From this point forward, there's going to be 7 individuals that are going to be listed. She's one of the 7, and these are important figures into what's going on. Now, something we need to remember is this may not be a physical woman that John is seeing, because he says a great sign appeared in the heaven. So he's giving over to symbolization, taking that apocalyptic style of interpretation. Since he uses the term sign and appeared, he's referencing something that he's trying to explain. The woman, frequently in the Old Testament, Israel, the people of Israel are called woman. The crown on the woman's head probably signifies that Christ's future kingdom came from Israel. Because John plainly said this is a sign, we don't expect that there's going to be a gigantic woman that appears in the sky, but they can see her on earth. God will use this sign to communicate something to us. So it's going to be fairly evident that something is happening. And if we see it, that it's going to happen from the country of Israel. The crown, the crown, that one kind of goes all over the place. Everyone jumps all over the place. Where I saw, when taking that apocalyptic style of interpretation, the way I saw it was I kind of go back to Joseph's dream, and it's in Genesis 37, 9 and 11. In that dream, the sun represented Jacob, and the moon represented Joseph's mother, Rachel. And the 11 stars were the sons of Israel, which bowed down to Joseph. So go back to that whole point where Joseph has his dream before he tells his brothers and they sell him into slavery and all this kind of stuff. That he mentions there were 11 stars, there were 11 brothers that bowed down to him, and then he references his father and his mother. So we would assume that the father representing the sun, the mother representing the moon, and then all the tribes. Now, there were only 11 brothers with Joseph, but when this woman comes down and we see the 11 stars, our assumption is that Joseph is now counted amongst them. Because before it was his 11 brothers bowing down to him, so Joseph would make the 12th star. And he's now among the other tribes of Israel. Verse 2, she was pregnant and crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Again, not a gigantic woman on the earth or in the sky that we can see on the earth that is birthing something. It'll be revealed that the child that's going to be born is going to be Jesus, and the pain she is in refers to the labor that Israel was in at the time of Jesus' birth. They were under Roman occupation, significant oppression when he was birthed. So John is referencing back to that point, that there will be great oppression, great pain that's going to be suffered by the country of Israel. The crying out is the pain of Israel's refusal to accept Christ. So throughout the entire books, right, we're reading, it seemed like the Hebrew nation just rejected Jesus Christ as anything, and they still do to this day. That they don't see him as a Messiah. I haven't jumped too much into it because once I start talking with I have a few Hasidic friends, Hasidic Jew friends, that I've tried to just explain this, and they kind of go way back, and they start picking up like different things from the Apocrypha and start trying to explain it, and so I get a little confused, and I didn't really study into that this deep, but because their refusal to accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah, they will be feeling a lot of what's going on, and it'll bring the nation of Israel, the nation of the Jewish nation, under unprecedented pain during the tribulation. But again, not death, but they will be experiencing. From this, we can see that not only through the oppression that we've seen throughout the millennia, right, of those that have come against the Jewish nation, we can see here that they also will be under not only oppression, but they'll be feeling pain as well because they refuse to accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Verses 3 and 4, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. Verse 4, he swept his tail down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. A lot of different imagery going on there. Kind of weird. But again, this is a sign. He's trying to explain what he's seeing, and this is the best way he can explain it. Believe it or not, when we use the term Satan and people see the dragon, this is typically where it comes from, is because the dragon is Satan. So whenever they say a great red dragon, that's why in a lot of today's pop culture, when you were to look at Satan, there's wings, there's horns, hooves, those kinds of things. Is really reminiscent of people's interpretation when they use the term a red dragon or something like that, that this is where it's kind of come from and been popularized. The creature here was not literally a great fiery red dragon, but the dragon represented the nature or the character of the individual that was coming against Israel. And again, this is Satan. 7 heads and diadems and the 10 horns. So these refer to the original 10 kingdoms that were around in the time. This dragon had great power and claimed royal authority over these 10 original kingdoms. The crowns represent his presumptive claims of royal authority over them against the true king. So we know that, God reigns over the earth. We know all this, but this is basically him saying, I've run these kingdoms, these 10 kingdoms. He wants to be considered a king today. Today as the god of this world, Satan dominates the evil world systems. He's all over the place. I'm not trying to say that he's in politics. He's in everything, you guys. But the influence will be even more potent and more obvious during the tribulation that his presence is there. So if people are going to acknowledge God, the Bible tells us that through a lot of these calamities, the earth bows its knees and declares that God is the one true God. He's the God of the heavens. He's the God of them. You also have to take in hindsight, too, that they also are going to have to acknowledge that if there is a God, there is indeed a devil. There is indeed a Satan. Because there can't be one and say, okay, that part of the Bible is true, and then just say, okay, well, the part about God is true, and the part about everything we're going through is true, but there is no devil. That's not how this is going to happen. It's saying his influence will become ever more prevalent. So through each calamity, through each phase, yes, God shows his mercy, but also people will be acknowledging that there is an enemy, that there is a devil, there is a Satan, and that his influence will continue to grow as these continue going on. In the middle of the tribulation, Satan will lose his access to heaven. Satan had access to heaven before this. If you don't believe me, go back and read the book of Job, where it says he was accusing believers. He was accusing them to God. So we know that he had access to heaven. Scholars differ on whether the specific reference, a third of the stars, is a reference to Satan corrupting another third of the angels of heaven, or if this is, or a point about his heaven or his immense earthly power. So as you kind of pull this through, because John's reading it as if it's happening during this time of the tribulation. So we know that when Satan was cast out, a third of the angels followed, or a third of the angels were cast out. So it says he's up there and he's swept out. So what our issue here is we can't determine the time frame that is going on between John seeing the great dragon, seeing Satan, and the sweeping of the third of the stars. Because he's giving symbolism, it's likely that what they're saying is that the one who swept a third of the angels out of heaven and were cast down to earth with him. So we can't really determine where John is, and that's where, like, going to that apocalyptic style, because he's in that sequence of symbolism, that we can take that this is not happening in real time. So it's not happening as John is seeing it. It's a reference to what has happened. We can see that, but what we know is that his influence on earth is going to continue. Satan's work in corrupting a third of the angels in heaven, his immensely power on earth. Either way, Satan and all rebelling demons will be cast down and barred from their normal communication with God. So that we know. There will be a time where they're denied access, or denied complete access to what's going on. So I had to look through that too, because as I was kind of pulling that apart, I'm like, wait a minute, like, how is that possible? Like, how? And it's like, yeah, he did have access because he was speaking with God. He was accusing believers. So he had to be in the presence of God. He had to be there to do this. And you know, when God tells him he can go after Job, but he can't kill him, you know, those kind of things. So Satan was still given limited power over Job, but it does say that he was with God and he was accusing the believers. So we know at a certain time, God is going to deny all access. Then let's look at verse 5. She gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God to his throne. So the male child, this refers to Jesus' birth. He came to save us. Rule all nations with a rod of iron refers to the triumphant return of Jesus Christ. So he's birthed, he's there, he comes by stating the starting point and the ending point of Jesus' earthly work. John alluded to all that stood in between. So he was giving his birth, his death, and he was saying everything in between. Satan's effort to destroy Jesus the Messiah had failed. He arose from the dead and ascended into heaven. John reports here that the woman's child was caught up to God and to his throne, reflecting an event which had already occurred. So this is why when we take apocalyptic style of interpretation, The symbolism is kind of jumping in different areas, but it's because John is seeing something and he's trying to explain what he's seeing. So he explains the woman is Israel and they're going to suffer during the tribulation. And then he mentions that Satan, and he talks about the stars and all this, but what we know is when he talks about the woman, he's talking about great suffering happening upon the Jewish nation. And then when he refers to Satan, we see that his influence will grow stronger on the earth. And then when he references the child being born, this is Jesus overcoming death, he's born as a man, he dies, he's resurrected and called up to the throne. So we know that all three are correlated. Oppression, Satan, Jesus' victory. So that's kind of how you have to take when he's writing this out. He's giving that interpretation of what he's feeling, what he's seeing, and who he's speaking to at the time. And it comes down to he's just giving a sequence of events. Israel be oppressed. The influence will go even greater. And then the one who declared victory over death will come down and he'll declare the entire world his dominion. Verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Seems to be in line with that same 3.5-year period where the two witnesses are speaking. It doesn't say they correlate, but this is the second time that you'll see the 1,260 days. That's uncommon. So it's likely these are happening in sequence. But again, this is a Jewish nation that is going to flee into a wilderness and be protected. So it's likely it's happening around that same time. Persecuted by the dragon, the woman is protected by God, and a place has been prepared for this period of time. So Israel will be led to a place to escape persecution from the enemy for that 3.5 period in the tribulation. Then let's look lastly at verses 7 and 9. A lot of reading here, but I wanted to group it together. Now war arose in heaven. Michael, that's an archangel, and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer a place for them in heaven. What? Verse 9. And the great dragon was thrown down, and the ancient serpent, who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world, he was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So, a war in heaven, Satan had, again, this is about access to heaven. He's trying to overtake it. But again, using this apocalyptic, since John is still in the symbolism period where he's describing what he's seeing, it's likely that he's seen them in different sequence and he's just trying to relay what it is. But at the midpoint of the Great Tribulation, God will turn the tide against Satan. So it's not that there is actually an ongoing war in heaven that's happening right now. It's that at a certain point, midway through the tribulation, God is going to cut off access to heaven. First in heaven, and then he'll eventually cut off access to earth. So he'll cut off access to heaven, so their dominion will be solely on earth because they've been released from the pit, right? So they're on earth, and then eventually after the tribulation, he'll cut off access to the earth, and they'll be cast back down into the pit. Michael and the dragon representing Satan, and Satan is not the counterpart to God. A lot of people get that confused. A lot of people. Saying, oh, well, if God is there, then Satan's the opposite. No, there is no counterpart to God. But if there is a counterpart to who Satan is, it would be another angel that is in the hierarchy of the sex of angels, right? So we would assume that Michael, who is listed in the Bible a few times, he would be also in that higher echelon of the angels and kind of their militaristic style of, we'll say, rank. So if you were to look at a counterpart for who Satan is, it would be Michael. It would be one of the angels listed by God. But Satan is not the counterpart to God. It's the counterpart, evil is the counterpart to good, but Satan is not the counterpart to God because Satan has to answer to God. Satan has to follow what God tells him to, so they're not of equal authority. But if you were to look at those who have equal authority, you would see Michael who commands, or the Bible tells us commands, legions of angels, and Satan who commands legions of demons. And Michael seems to be the chief angel opposite of the chief of the fallen angels. So this battle occurs at the midpoint of the 7-year period of the tribulation. So it appears we're kind of right at the midpoint of the tribulation. This verse is not describing Satan's original fall. It's describing a future where Satan and his followers are, again, they're denied access to heaven, and they're kept solely on the plains of the earth, and they'll be eventually denied access to the earth. So verse 12 is getting highly symbolic, and it gets really easy to get confused as to what's going on because it seems like there's jumping around in timelines. It may be a little bit easier for us today going through the Marvel verse where things are happening at different times. We have prequels and sequels coming out. So it may be easier for us to track that, but it's very difficult because John is describing it as a single sign. He's describing it as a linear event. But it's because he's being shown the signs in a linear event that are referencing back to things that have already happened. And then he jumps from there, from a linear event into a future event, because he starts using present tense words. So he's using before past tense, then he starts using present tense. So it's likely at one point the line cuts and then it goes to exactly what John is seeing midway through the tribulation. So when he talks about the woman, the dragon, and the male child, he's referencing a linear event that's happened, and then it seems like it gets cut, and then he jumps to an event that is yet to happen. But it's still in that symbolic style of writing, so we can surmise from that this is all still in symbolic terms. So yes, Satan will be denied access to heaven, and he'll be kept on the earth, and then denied access to the earth and thrown back into the pit. But as to the sequence of events of how that's happening, it gets a little confusing there. And this is, I'm gonna be honest, chapter 12 is one of the ones I've had the most difficult time and have spent the most time in trying to figure this out, because it does feel like it jumps all over the place. But basically what it comes down to is you have to take what he's trying to tell his current readers, and what he's trying to tell them is that the Jewish nation rejected the Messiah. They'll feel the pains from that. Satan's influence on the earth will get stronger and stronger and stronger until eventually he's cut off from access to heaven, and then his only realm is on the earth. And then from that, he'll be denied access from that realm onto the earth. And so that's why it feels like it jumps around. But tons of eschatologists and biblical scholars, they're even at a point where it's kind of like, read it, try and find a sequence, and your guess is as good as mine. Because I was kind of like on chat rooms and kind of asking questions. And again, you ask one question, you get 30 answers that all contradict themselves. So I try to do the best with following strict apocalyptic style of interpretation and reading this portion of it, and that's what I came up with. So if it's a little confusing, go back, slow the whole video down, and watch it like half speed, and we'll see if that makes any more sense. But I do feel like chapter 12 is it's full of symbolism, and it's full of things that John is just kind of like, it's like word vomit. He's just throwing it out there. He's writing it down. So we're going to try to continue to do our best to get this out in a simple sequence that's easy to follow. But if you want to continue to support this ministry through tithes, through offerings, through love gifts, please do so. You can do that via EasyTithe on your smartphone app. You can also go to easytithe.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno. You'll see which one you can give on. You can go to praisechapelfresno.com, click the menu button. You'll see Give. Click on that. It's going to take you to a third-party website that we deal with that you can give safely and securely. If you're joining us on our in-person services, we have our envelopes on the backs of every chair. Tithes and offerings box located just outside of the sanctuary for you to drop it off in. We'll get it deposited in a timely manner. If you're joining us on our online campuses only, we appreciate that. If you want to continue to mail in, drop off your tithes or offerings, your love gifts, you can do so by finding our address. You don't know what our address is, just Google Praise Chapel Fresno, California. It'll be right there for you. Go ahead and mail that in, drop it off, however you want to do it. We'll make sure it gets deposited in a timely manner. Don't forget the baseball game coming up this Saturday. It'll be starting at 5. A concert will start at 5. And we'll be at 6. Please stay tuned to our social media. We'll put out where we're meeting, a central point we meet at, so you can grab your tickets and we can all sit together, have some fun, eat, and watch a baseball game. We love you guys. We can't wait to see you guys this Saturday at the game, and then Sunday online or in person at 10 a.m. We love you. We'll see you then.